All right, let's start the very important session of the India Energy Week. It is about the nuclear power. I am Nobuo Tanaka. I'm moderating the session. I was the executive director of the International Energy Agency, not Atomic Energy Agency, but IEA has been very much interested in the future of the nuclear power. And just a couple of weeks ago, they released the publication called Path to a New Era for Nuclear Energy. And Fatih Birol, the current executive director, said that nuclear is really in upbeat because in this year, nuclear power generation will be historically high. And also, the 70 gigawatts of the new construction is going in 15 countries. This is also historic. And 40 countries or more are concrete plan to use nuclear in the future. So new issues or new elements is the data centers' demand for electricity certainly may enable the deployment of the small modular reactor, which has been really coming true yet. So this is a very interesting moment to talk and to learn about the nuclear policy in the future. India certainly play a very, very important role. But I think first I will ask Sama that you are observing what's happening in nuclear for the whole world. So do you agree with this Fatih Birol's comments about the very bright future of the nuclear, and what do you think?
Well, thank you, Tanaka-san. So yes, from our point of view, from World Nuclear Association point of view, we are seeing a very serious interest of about nuclear energy everywhere else in the world. So in the last, I would say 2-3 years, we've seen how many countries in the world have recognized that it's simply not possible to reach the Paris Agreement goals in a sustainable, cost-effectively, timely, and very importantly, equitable manner without nuclear energy. So this means that there is lots of interest in every country in the world, or most countries in the world that currently have nuclear. We are looking into the extension of the life of these units for as long as feasible. We are looking at 60, 80, perhaps 100 years of operation. We are looking at power plant uprates, which means that we are going to extract more energy from the same asset. We are looking at the repowering units that have been prematurely shut down, so this is also very important. Now, this is with the existing assets. There is lots and lots of interest, as you just mentioned, to build new nuclear reactors. So there is currently 65 reactors under construction in many countries in the world. Some of these countries are newcomer countries, meaning they have never had nuclear power before. Bangladesh, Turkey, Egypt, for example. And then we see up to 200 projects planned and moving forward all over the world. So this is for many reasons. Number one, energy security. Clearly, in recent times, many countries have become aware of the importance of being independent when it comes to energy. Number two is because of sustainability concerns, whether it's climate change or simply pollution, which is something that in India we are very, very aware. And then, of course, there is the part of equity. We really need to recognize that it's at least 800 million people all over the world that have zero access to any energy, clean, dirty, no matter what. They don't have any. And then I would say, as you mentioned very briefly, that the end energy users, the intensive energy users, have been a very strong force to bring the visibility of nuclear, because this is the data centers, the tech companies, metallurgical industry, aviation industry, cement, oil and gas, shipping, fresh water from desalination, etc., etc., etc. All those users are recognizing that they need 24/7 electricity and heat. And nuclear energy is the only carbon-free energy source that can actually produce both. So this is all very, very exciting, and we are seeing lots and lots of interest globally.
Thank you, Sama. Very good summary and what's happening in the global and very, very positive direction. Thank you for your comment. Loyiso, how about the developing country? I mean, like South Africa, what's the role of nuclear for energy security, or at the same time, maybe decarbonization? Do you think the role of nuclear is getting bigger in the developing economies?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Nobuo, and greetings to the audience at large. I want to state up front that there's got to be a nationalistic approach to energy security, because different countries face different requirements at different parts in their lives. If I look at the continent in general, the continent of Africa, is the biggest issue that we have is energy access. We currently have about 50% of people who are electrified in the African continent. We are lucky in South Africa that we have pushed that number to about 90%, and that was a deliberate effort to make sure that every household has got access to electricity. And I believe that is the same in India, that there is that push, and there's been a political will to make it happen. So I want to go back and say, with Africa and South Africa, we really need to get to a point of saying, what is the main thing that bugs us about energy? It is energy access. Before you can talk about whether it's cheap or it's carbon-free, energy access is the main thing, and we must focus on that and not lose our eye on the ball. So nuclear, in my mind, does play a very important role in ensuring that ultimate objective for the continent, in that it provides energy security, energy available 24 hours a day. And there are many countries that are starting to look at nuclear as newcomer countries in the continent. South Africa happens to operate 2 reactors for power generation since 1984 and 85. We also have a research reactor for medical isotopes since 1965. So we're very much ahead in terms of operating and managing nuclear installations. And we are learning the journey with the other countries of the world, but also taking along those that are willing to walk the journey with us in the continent. And I want to say that as part of that process, we've seen what the 2 nuclear units do. They currently contribute about 4% of our energy in the country, and it is virtually carbon-free. And that's the direction that we need to take. We're not talking from any theoretical approach, we're talking about empirical evidence right on our hands. So nuclear meets the sweet spot of energy security and decarbonization. But it also added to that is the third aspect of the energy trilemma, which is affordability. If you look at our utilities books for the last financial year, nuclear is by far the cheapest source of energy, cheaper than renewables, cheaper than gas, cheaper than coal, which we have in abundance. So it's not a mythical concept, it's a real concept that is there, and sometimes we fail to read and fail to look at the evidence right in front of our eyes. So for me, the role of nuclear is very clear that with the interest globally in some areas tripling nuclear, it is important that even embarking nations and nations that have got nuclear power, they look at it and say, with this technology, we hit the 3 most important aspects, which is affordability, security, as well as environmental sustainability. And I believe that South Africa as a country is reviewing its energy plan. We currently have an ambition of building more nuclear power plants at about 2,500 by 2035. But there is a new plan that is being looked at, and I believe that we're going to be seeing more and more nuclear megawatts that are needed onto the grid, in addition to other energy sources.
Thank you, Loyiso. In the IEA report about Africa, I understand that access to the electricity or access to the energy is a very important element to alleviate poverty. And for that sake, the African countries should develop the grid system as such. So that is another additional cost of deploying nuclear. Don't you think you have the good way to solve these access issues by building this grid system as such?
So I think let's look at the issue of energy access in 2 ways. There is energy poverty at the generation source, which means generated megawatts or installed megawatts per capita. Africa is by far the lowest in the continent. So, which means we need to build generation capacity. Then there's a second order aspect about energy access, which is it accessible in terms of the transmission and the distribution lines, as well as the affordability thereof, because that's also a big access issue in that you could have it generated, but if it's prohibitive and it's expensive, no one will be able to use it. As we see it in some areas that people use electricity just for lighting, it's not used for cooking. We need to think about different ways of making sure that we can use electricity for multiple purposes. I note in India that there's a strong focus on using gas for cooking to alleviate that issue of electricity. But also aligned to that point is the new age thinking now of small modular reactors, which can be deployed in fairly remote areas, which make access easier, and you grow your transmission infrastructure and distribution infrastructure gradually. It's not that immediate cost that is needed to link differently distant grid systems.
Yeah, I'm going back to this SMR and the cost issue later. I mean, this is a very interesting element which we want to talk a little more. Rajnath, I think you are from India and your institute is advising the government, etc., for the transformation of India. And what do you think the nuclear play as a transformation of India?
Thank you, Tanaka. Let me put a perspective of nuclear from the India side. We have taken a place to become a developed nation by 2047. And so that would definitely require a huge infrastructure build-up. As of now, it is said that only 10% India has been built. Still 90% we have to build. So you can imagine the kind of investment required and the kind of energy growth. Electricity growth, which is ranging around 6 to 7% every year, and we assume that by 2047, our primary energy demand would increase like 2.5 to 3 times. The real challenge before us is, as of now, we are fossil dependent, and so the global, and more than 80% in our primary energy demand or consumption is a fossil-based energy resources. So how to defossilize the thing? That the one aspect one must consider. As far as the electricity is concerned, if you are going to build up huge infrastructure, your industry, manufacturing, you require a constant power, constant baseload power. And if you want to defossilize, reduce your penetration of coal-based power generation, the alternate source of energy remains the nuclear only. So we see a huge potential for nuclear because, as my earlier speaker mentioned, it's a least cost in terms of least emission in terms of the different technologies, just at par with the wind technology. Accordingly, I think India has taken a bold step, and recently in the budget we have announced to build up about 100 gigawatt capacity by 2047. And it would be a mix of both the conventional as well as the SMR. And SMR mission has been launched, where I think India would be working to develop at least 5 domestic small modular reactor in this space. And conventional nuclear power, where I think PSWR is where I think one of the major technologies they've developed indigenously by India. So that would be built up on a fleet mode basis. So by 2030, we are expecting something like 23, 24 gigawatt, and by 2047, something like 100. And by 2070, more than 200 gigawatt. I mean, that's the horizon we are working for building the nuclear in the system.
Good, very bright future. Prasenjit, what, from your viewpoint of the power company of India, what do you think the promotion of nuclear is moving as planned, or you have certain difficulties? How do you see the current situation of using nuclear in the power deployment?
Thank you, Tanaka. And good afternoon, everybody. The energy security of India is going to come from a basket of technologies. There's no single solution to it. It is going to be a basket of multiple technologies. So far, that basket has been with wind, solar, partly nuclear, fossil fuel, and all sorts of technologies. What the government is now targeting is to slightly change the distribution so that we have a higher percentage of nuclear and therefore a slightly reduced carbon footprint of the entire energy matrix, so to say. So prima facie, I don't see many problems. One thing, of course, is there that if we are going to add such a large nuclear capacity, obviously one single organization cannot do it, and therefore the government has rightly allowed multiple organizations to sort of start in the nuclear field. That's the first part. Second part is, if you're again going to add such substantial capacity, we will run into the issue of the supply chain management, because if you look at the past in India, the number of contracts awarded for nuclear plants were very few, and therefore the private manufacturers and suppliers don't really have that kind of capacity to overnight produce a large number of products, and therefore the supply chain needs to be built up. So this is still under discussion. The government is discussing with all sorts of agencies. So we need to really attack it on multiple fronts, as I said. One front is multiple agencies trying to establish nuclear projects. That could be public sector, private sector, joint venture, everything. There would be a necessity for improving the supply chain so that the contractors are in a position to supply the hardware and install the hardware. And then, of course, there would be the final input that would be required for the nuclear industry, which is the nuclear fuel. And therefore, the fuel chain security will have to be sort of thought of and ensured so that the nuclear plants can go into production. So I think that would be the kind of a thing, and the government is working on all these fronts.
Very interesting point about the supply chain issues and also fuel. For the light water reactor, the enrichment is certainly the very peculiar service necessary, and only 4 or 5 countries in the world can do that. So this issue of kind of monopoly in the enrichment is one of the elements of geopolitical concerns. Do you think this does, India are using heavy water reactor which do not use any enrichment services, but at the same time, by maintaining the good supply chain, I think the issue is how can make a good global collaboration or more industrial or more strategic policy of the government is needed to keep the supply chain. India is moving in a very interesting direction, or you are going to be a very independent player in this kind of game.
The answer would be in 2 parts. One is we already have a established 3-stage nuclear program of the government of India, which is being pursued by the Department of Atomic Energy. And the first stage is already well rolled out. We have substantial number of pressurized heavy water reactors in service. The second stage is the fast breeder reactor, and the first commercial reactor of its type is under fueling in Chennai right now. And by end of the year, we should be reaching full load, by which time the fast breeder reactor would have been proven. Therefore, India's second stage would be proven, which means we start using thorium. That really opens up the whole nuclear fuel cycle, because once we are able to use thorium in the fuel chain, then considering the substantial amount of thorium that we have as a reserve, perhaps that would improve the overall availability of nuclear fuel in the country.
Right. Yeah, thorium is really India's interest and the kind of very specialty. Sama, what do you think about the supply chain issues? Also, the thing which I will ask you is the SML can reduce costs of construction or operation in the future.
Well, let me start by continuing a little bit with what we heard about the nuclear fuel cycle. So I think it is important to recognize that the nuclear industry is a global industry, and historically it has worked very well to make sure that we have this nuclear fuel cycle well distributed globally. So there is the reserves and the resources of uranium, the enrichment, the conversion, the fuel fabrication, all those capabilities are well distributed throughout the entire world. So what we are seeing right now, given these complexities that we have in the geopolitical situation, is a little bit of an imbalance in different regions when it comes to some of those fuel services. At the same time, given that we are expecting to probably at least triple global nuclear capacity by 2050, there has been enormous investment already, both from governments but also from private industry, to actually rebalance this regional imbalance that we have seen, particularly in the area of enrichment and conversion. So from that point of view, we feel that the global nuclear fuel supply chain is well secure. In fact, I will recommend everybody in the audience, World Nuclear Association publishes every 2 years what we call the Nuclear Fuel Report. This is the most authoritative report as far as the front end of the nuclear fuel cycle, and this will be published this September. So if you want to have the most up-to-date information on that, I recommend that you take a look at that. But and the other thing that I think is very important to recognize is the nuclear energy, the uranium, is an incredibly dense energy source. So a small amount of uranium has 1 million times more energy than, for example, coal. So the density is significantly different. So this means, of course, that the amount of uranium, etc., that needs to be mined is much smaller, and also that the impact of the price of uranium in the price of nuclear electricity is really, really small. So those are important steps. Now, you asked me also about the costs of nuclear. So I think that Loyiso made a big point that perhaps is not something that matches with everybody's perception of nuclear. But the reality is nuclear power plants today produce one of the most affordable ways of producing electricity in most countries. And this is particularly true if you take into account the fact that this is the only 24/7 carbon-free form of energy. So if you take into account not just the cost of generating the electricity, but the cost of having a stable, resilient, robust grid that is incumbent upon all the generation sources, nuclear continues to be very, very cost-effective. Right. Now, new nuclear, which is the question that many people is trying to look at. So nuclear power plants, as all other carbon-free or low-carbon energy sources, are very capital-intensive. In nuclear, the single highest cost of building a new nuclear power plant is typically the cost of financing the construction. So the very second that nuclear power plants have access to the same affordable financing that other low-carbon energy sources do have currently, then the cost of producing nuclear power plants is exactly equivalent or lower, as we see in other technologies. And this is something that we are seeing already. UAE has proven this, China has proven this, Korea, and many other countries have shown us how this is possible.
Right. So yeah, standardization of the reactor is the way to reduce, and not the size of it. That is, I think, the small modular reactor's future is a very interesting test. That this cost reduction happens there.
I think that you are completely right. I think that small modular reactors, obviously, they are going to take advantage of 6 decades of experience operating nuclear reactors at a global level. So what we are doing is taking all that experience into the smaller reactors, and what is going to be unique and quite impactful of these reactors is the delivery model. Because they are smaller, they can be factory fabricated, the construction period is going to be faster, which means that they are going to be more affordable. Right. So we are moving from an economies of scale that we are seeing in large reactors to economies of series. Essentially, we are going to repeat this many, many, many times. We are going to get to the nth of a kind much quicker. And then, of course, the other thing is what Loyiso was mentioning, is we can customize the applications of the small modular reactors. Yes, of course, they can produce electricity, but very importantly, they can also produce heat. And heat can be ideal, as I mentioned earlier, for many other industrial processes. So we already have a lot of interest from the oil and gas industry. We want to decarbonize scope 1 and 2 of
Even
the
steel making, right?
steel making, cement making, desalination, to produce sustainable aviation fuel for shipping.
Right.
We are actually looking at having nuclear propelled marine vessels for shipping. So there's many opportunities to make the most of these small reactors in addition as a complement to the large reactors.
Yeah, I cannot agree more. That's right. Industrial self-use is another kind of future, and not only power generation, but heat is a very important element for the nuclear. Loyiso, my question is that for the nuclear, one of the issues which we have to overcome is the radioactive waste. In South Africa, do you have a plan to take care of the waste or spent fuel?
Thank you very much. Maybe let me start with the earlier question about the front end part of the cycle. I'll come to the back end side of the question. So just to correct your statement, it's not only a few nations that can enrich or even fabricate fuel. There's only a few nations that are doing it today. If you do subscribe to the right protocols with the International Atomic Energy Agency, any other nation can do it. A point in case is that South Africa used to do it at some point, it was stopped, and now our policy, nuclear energy policy of 2008, says we shall be self-sufficient in all aspects of the fuel cycle. So it should not be seen as a preserve of a few, but rather as what each nation wants to do. So that can be done by any other nation, but it needs a lot of groundwork before it can be done. But back to your question as well on the back-end fuel. So there's a very clear strategy for waste management. All of the high-level waste or high-used nuclear fuel that's been used to operate the 2 nuclear reactors since 1984, it is currently stored on site where the nuclear plant is, in an interim storage facility. And that's a beautiful story in the sense that you can account for all of it. At this point in time, it would fit in less than half a tennis court. That's the high-level waste. But there are other lower-level waste and medium-level waste which are stored in steel and concrete drums, which is really linked to things that are part of the processing. Those are stored in a deep geological storage facility that is in the drier part of the country, which is about 500 or 600 kilometers from the power station. Similarly, with the research reactor that we operate on my site, is that we can account for all the used fuel since 1965, all contained, managed, and monitored. Similarly, the other waste is dispatched to the same geological storage site. That storage site has been studied. It's seismically proven to be the right place to store the waste. And similarly, in terms of the hydrology, it will not contaminate any other nearby infrastructure. It's in the dry part of our country. So it's very important to say that nuclear, as its concept and the fundamental design of the entire value chain, that you can account for everything that we have done. And I think that should be our selling point rather than it being a drawback.
Okay. Very good. In Japan, the problem is that after Fukushima accident, meltdown debris should be stored somewhere, but reducing the toxicity is the key. So I'm promoting the idea of using fast reactor and reduce the waste to the manageable level and for 300 years rather than 300,000 years. But this is a very peculiar Japanese problem, and we need technology to solve that. Rajnath-san, I think Japan is especially the case after the Fukushima accident. Public acceptance is really important to make nuclear possible. How about India? Is there any problem of public acceptance?
This is a very general fear for the public. If you name the nuclear, so they imagine it just like a bomb. So that's the kind of imagination immediately comes into the general perception of the people. So I think Department of Atomic Energy has also initiated some courses at the school level that how the nuclear is safe in our environment. So that's the one aspect generally. But we have to do a lot more than that to change the perception of the people, because and where I think a lot of agencies has to be involved, and the government itself has to promote the awareness campaign, educating the people and make them aware that how safe is the nuclear. So that is the one promotional aspect definitely the government has to take forward.
Thank you. How about Prasenjit-san? The same question to you. As a power company, you have to consider seriously the public acceptance, right? And for example, radioactive waste issue is certainly one of the very important element of public acceptance. What your company is doing in promoting public acceptance?
Okay. To answer it very simply, we are taking it in a two-pronged approach. On the one side, we are in consultation with the different government departments, and we have already instituted, or rather rolled out a public awareness kind of a program in which we are having a very soft advertising initiative wherein we bring out the good points about nuclear and try to drive a narrative that builds a positive thought about nuclear projects across the country. The second part is wherever we go to establish a nuclear plant, we need to educate the local villages, because the local villages, as was rightly pointed out, are very poor people, not really that much aware of all the things. For them, anything nuclear is a bomb. So you have to change their mindset. And towards that end, we are starting, for instance, our new project at Mahi Banswara in Rajasthan. We are actively engaging all the villagers and taking them to, see other nuclear plants and sort of giving them a reassurance that nuclear is safe. So that kind of a positive image building is absolutely necessary, and that is what we need to really work on. But again, any one organization cannot do it, and as he has rightly pointed out, I think multiple organizations should start working on that initiative, and across the country, across the fabric, we need to develop a positive image of nuclear energy. So I think we are all working towards that. But there is definitely an issue, because once you go for land acquisition in a greenfield area and you say nuclear project, there is a little bit of problem of acceptance on that. So that definitely needs to be sort of driven in, to build a positive image.
Thank you. Sama, yes. I think for the sake of improving the public acceptance, the role of women in the nuclear industry is very important. I created the working group in the Canon Institute in Japan, only consisting of women, except me. Because I have heard that one of the investment advisory company in Japan, consisting of only women, stopped recommending Tokyo Electric Company just half a year before that big accident. And I wonder why she did that. And she said, well, they recorded all the mistakes and accidents of any company they recommend. And Tokyo Electric repeatedly same mistakes, do the same mistakes, and do not change the system. So they stopped recommending TEPCO. And she wondered why other companies didn't do. And I said, well, that reminds me something, because my wife remembers all the mistakes which I made since I married to her, and reminds me from time to time, oh, because you are the women, that's the reason why you did that. So the role of women here, Sama, do you think women can promote, if women can accept certain model of nuclear, Japanese public may agree with the future of the nuclear. So I'm testing.
Well, I will tell you that my husband also reminds me of all my mistakes. So,
wow.
So I think that goes both
It's
ways.
very fair to say.
But no, let me just say, so I wanted to, make this a little bit of a bigger picture. So what we are seeing literally at a global level today is that the acceptance of nuclear energy is very, very high in all continents. So you are looking at Czech Republic, over 75 of the acceptance. You are looking at Poland, higher than that. You are looking at US, Canada. We are looking at very high acceptance levels. What tends to happen in many countries is that people people think, well, I don't mind nuclear energy. Nuclear energy is okay, but everybody else doesn't like it. So the problem is that we have this weird perception of nuclear. So it is actually true, you're right, that in general, globally, the acceptance of nuclear energy by women is perhaps a little bit lower. But at the same time, the nuclear industry has been working quite a bit in two aspects. Number one, making sure that everybody, including women, understand well what truly is nuclear energy. And number two, and just as important, or perhaps even more, is we are doing a huge effort to increase the participation of women in the nuclear industry. So currently, about 20% of the global nuclear workforce is women, which is not very high, but it's not different than in most other energies, okay? So 20% is in general not good, but it's just as bad everywhere else. So we've been doing a lot of effort because, of course, if we are serious about tripling global nuclear capacity by 2050, we are going to need to triple global nuclear workforce by 2050. And within that effort, we are actually making sure that we engage, we attract, we retain, we inspire many more men, women, and all kinds of people to actually join the nuclear industry. And we have been working quite seriously with the International Atomic Energy Agency and many of our members at a global level to actually promote the role of nuclear among women and other minorities.
Thank you. Yeah, energy sector is a very lag behind the this gender balance. So we should definitely improve that for the next Indian Energy Week also.
Yes.
Loyiso, your wife is not remembering all the mistakes you did. No, you don't have to answer that. But just we have just 1 minute less. Final small question is that what do you think about international collaboration for the future of the nuclear? Just let's start from, I think, Prasenjit-san, and coming back to Sama.
If the world is going to be a progressive place, we definitely need to have a higher percentage of nuclear energy, and towards that extent, substantial cooperation and support would be required, and a proper supply chain needs to be established. So I think that would be my thought.
Very good.
Yeah, completely agree with his point. And the safeguard would be then one important aspect, I think, where you need much more collaboration, and of course the supply chain, and then also the fuel. Fuel is an important source for this nuclear. So how to bridge collaboration among that is also equally important.
Thank you, Rajnath-san. Loyiso.
Yes. So from our end, I think the accidents have shown, the nuclear accidents in the form of Fukushima and even Chernobyl, that it takes one nuclear accident to nullify the good work that has been done by other nuclear utilities. So it is very important that we realize the global impact that each unit has got. Right. And as such, we need to make sure that we intensify the collaboration. So it is imperative. And it is currently demonstrated through peer review mechanisms that we have for the power stations and many other collaborations, bilateral collaborations that exist. But the most important thing that I believe will help springboard the nuclear technology forward is exactly what Sama was saying in terms of having a proper communication, advocacy kind of a system that is a global network.
Yeah.
Because if nation does it by itself, then you lose it. So we need an international collaboration in terms of advocacy.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Loyiso. Sama.
Yes, I would say that is, I'm in full agreement, and I would say that perhaps the nuclear industry is even ahead of other industries in international collaboration. Exactly for what Loyiso said, that we are very aware that we are in this together, that we all benefit from the successes of others, but also we will pay for the errors of others. The nuclear industry has historically had a fabulous record of collaboration. We share best practices, and we also share opportunities for improvement. And those are typically public, so this is part of the reason why your colleague was able to have access to all the not so good examples of operation of nuclear power plants. So yes, we continue to work together because this is a team effort, obviously.
Thank you very much. Definitely, we should share the mistakes. I mean, for example, the lessons of Fukushima is a very important information to share, and there we should not repeat the same mistake as Japan did. So I really want to have a good international collaboration in the nuclear sector because we are in the same boat. If one country make a really big accident, then we will wreck together. So this is really the feature of the nuclear power, and I really want this kind of collaboration and good discussion and exchange of information helps the future of the nuclear. Thank you very much for joining me, thanking these good panelists today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.